Hey everybody, welcome to my video on money demand functions and money markets. I made this for my macro econ class and maybe it'll help you with yours too. Let's get started. M is our money supply. P is aggregate prices. M over P is real money balance. M over P measures how much stuff the money supply can buy. We're going to treat the supply of real money as fixed and exogenous at M over P. So with all that in place, let's get going. Notation. I'm using the Mancube book, so I don't know if your book's different, but it uses M over P in parentheses with a D as real money demand. Now let's look at this a little bit. In my other videos, I would have just called this QD, the quantity demanded of money. But we're going to go with M over P, and we're going to do so knowing that it is the quantity of real money, and that's what M over P is. So there's our money demand. And we're going to set it equal to some function, some liquidity function of I and Y. So L is for liquidity preference. Money loses value when there's inflation around. So yeah, there's actually a cost to holding money. But there's also the benefit of it being liquid. So the more we want to have liquidity, the more money we'll want. But there's also interest rates, and we're going to specify the ex-ante nominal interest rate in there as the cost of holding money, and Y being real GDP or income, if you want to call it that. And so we get this. Our money demand is equal to this liquidity function of ex-ante nominal interest rates and GDP. That's real money demand. That D up there is not an exponent, it's just a label. Now, a couple of quick notes. If you speak calculus, the liquidity function is decreasing in I, which means that higher interest rates mean less demand. And it is increasing in Y, which means that higher GDP means more money demand. Our supply of real money is fixed at M over P. And our equilibrium happens when these two equations equal each other. So that'd be when supply equals demand. M over P equals this liquidity function. Okay, that was pretty fast, but you can rewind if you want to. Let's move on. What if we have a liquidity function, a demand function, that's just Y over 2I? Notice it fits what we want. If Y gets bigger, demand gets bigger. If I gets bigger, demand gets smaller. You could rewrite it to have the real interest rate and expected inflation if you wanted to. But let's explore what happens when we give this thing functional form. If the change in GDP is 4% and I does not change, demand will grow by 4%. There's our growth rate rules. If the top is growing by 4% and the bottom is growing by nothing, then the whole fraction grows by 4. If GDP grows by 4% and the interest rate is growing by 1%, which is kind of weird. I mean, don't worry about that too much, what that would actually mean. Money demand would be growing by 4 minus 1 is 3%. Great, so let's move on. We can link this to the quantity theory of money. We have this quantity equation, MV equals PY. And we have this money demand function, which is M over P equals Y over 2I. And we can rewrite this as M times 2I equals PY. So these two things are equivalent when the velocity is double the interest rate. So those can get linked together too. There's another avenue we could go down on some application problem. Other note, our money market is in equilibrium when? Can you guess it? When supply equals demand. When that M over P for your supply curve equals the Y over 2I for the demand curve. We'll explore that a little bit in a couple of minutes. Now, as a side note, let's explore our demand curve a little bit more before we go into any of that. If the interest rate rises, what happens to money demand? Well, let's see. There's your money demand function. If the interest rate rises, then that fraction gets smaller, which means your money demand will fall. If the interest rate rises, what happens to the price? Well, let's see. We can rewrite all that stuff to get it as a function of price. All I did was move some fractions around to solve for P. And if the interest rate rises, price goes up. So if interest rate rises, we're going to see price up. We're going to see demand go down. That stuff's all a factor here. Another angle we can take on this, what if the Fed announced cuts to the money supply? We've got our Fisher equation. We've got our quantity theory of money growth rate stuff for inflation. Inflation is the rate of growth of the money supply minus the rate of growth of the GDP. And so this can all be connected too. If the money supply growth is going to fall, then inflation's going to fall. If inflation's going to fall, then interest rates are going to fall. And so we can get into all that stuff. With that, money demand will rise, price will fall, interest rates fell. Okay. I know it's kind of a big crash course, but there you go. We've unpacked our notation. We've explored a little bit of how these demand curves move. And now you're ready to move forward in life and solve some crazy crap. Good luck, you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.